I want to talk a little bit about it, and I mentioned it a little bit in your bio, but you go back to working for three really large carriers. But you got your start before that. Tell me a little bit about your journey. From Sendent, it's been product management into marketing, Priceline, and up through the big carriers. I mean, these are all big companies you worked for. And doing a startup is very, very different than working for these mammoth companies. So tell me a little bit about that journey and what, if any, challenges you had going into a company without the kind of infrastructure you were used to.
Those are great questions, and I'll try to unpack and
Yeah.
answer with a few different lines.
Hmm.
Um, I'm gonna have to bring up that I was a woman in large business. At AIG, I considered
Yep.
that Wall Street.
Hmm.
Being a woman, and I might add, as you only just learned, being a short woman on Wall Street is not easy. I dressed with, the big heels and
Yeah.
tried to be close to the 6 foot tall men that I worked with, but it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot there. The progression was interesting. As I was leaving Swiss Re, I was also joining the board of an organization that I consider really important in my life called Grameen Foundation. And
Mm.
Grameen is all about financial inclusion for women around
Mm.
the globe. And so that identification, my working with an organization that's really important about helping women in financial inclusion,
Mm.
was near and dear to my heart. And so it helped me in terms of making the decision to start a company.
Mhm.
Um, I might say that most people who start companies for the first time, unless they, grew up in Silicon Valley surrounded by it, cannot possibly know what it's really all about.
That's right.
Techstars helped. And I would
Mhm.
say that the managing director of our Techstars, Lars Perkins, who's an amazing person and had built a company himself that he sold to Google, helped all of the cohort at Techstars understand what it
Yeah.
really means to start a company.
Mhm.
There was a lot of conversation about don't expect to get rich quick. It's
Mhm.
really hard. You have to have grit and tenacity. I think I had built a fair amount of that over the course of my career. But I would say today it's that team, the
Yeah.
founders plus a few of the newer
Mhm.
members of our team who create that community support that makes me feel comfortable and
Mhm.
confident
Mhm.
and makes our team work as a team in battling some of the difficult things that founders battle in new companies.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to step back for a minute again to your raise, and I should have asked you this before, but I it just came back into my head, and I want to ask you before I forget. Um, did you have any difficulty when it was just when it was just the two of you starting out, convincing anybody to give you money?
It's a wonderful
And
question.
enrolling them and giving you money because, so often people say teams get funded, individuals don't.
Hmm.
Now, that's just a generalization. And of course, there are exceptions to everything. But I've heard many founders say that to me.
I might get on my soapbox here.
That's perfectly fine.
it the answer is we did quite well and it went relatively smoothly.
Hmm.
And that's in part because of relationships I had and in large part
Hmm.
because of relationships that Hyman had.
Right.
But the true answer in the startup world is those who are successful are
Mm-hmm.
almost always white men who have exited before.
Right. Of course.
There's a reality there.
Let's just call that out as it is. Yeah.
It is super,
Hmm.
super hard.
Hmm.
And I mean, look, I raised 2 million. That is a very small amount. It's more than what we asked for. But when you look at the Silicon Valley world, it is a very small raise. And in fact, in order to compete, particularly in the payment world, And
Mhm.
then in the multifamily world,
Mhm.
it takes a fair amount of money.
Right.
And so that is not easy. And I just want to call out it's hard. I mean, women still get 2 to 3% of VC funds. That is unconscionable,
I know, it's horrible.
especially when we know that
Mhm.
women-led companies do better
Mhm.
than men-led companies. I mean, it's
Yeah, I'm
unconscionable.
yeah, it's I mean, it's interesting because more and more research is really indicating that women, especially in executive leadership roles, contribute to the bottom line more than any man does. I mean, every bit of research is showing that.
Yeah, I don't need
So,
to
I
go
mean,
too
I don't
far.
wanna sit here and bash men, of course, I love men, but, there is a reality that and I sometimes think it's because I don't know if it's just that not enough women are entrepreneurs, I think that's part of it. More women are becoming entrepreneurs, but I think there's a fear. Men fear.
Sure. I
Please
mean,
don't send me hate mail when you people who listen to this.
I will
But
do
I
a
think there is
call.
something there.
Sure. I'll do a call out to the CEO of Techstars, Maëlle
Mhm,
Gavet. She's written an
mhm,
amazing book, and she
mhm,
talks about the facts of raising funds and
mhm.
being in the VC world. And
Yeah,
it just is, it screams that more money should go to the underserved,
mhm.
women and
Yeah,
people of color. And that,
yes.
I'm
A
proud,
and f Yep.
but
I think this is a really good opportunity to put in a plug for somebody I'm gonna be interviewing here in another week or 2, who's one of the partners of Foundry, the Foundry Group
oh,
here in
sure.
Boulder,
Yeah.
Seth Levine, who I'm interviewing. I've known Seth for north of a decade, and he wrote a book recently, and specifically about what you've just talked about. The people of color, women, the harder, he and his co-writer now are now working on another book, but I'll talk to him more about that. But I didn't want to glaze over that because you're making a really important point, and there are people out there who are working to change that.
Yes, there are.
And I,
And I
send
applaud them all.
bravo to Seth for doing that
Yeah.
as a white man, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah. No, good point.
um, let's talk a little bit about the competitive nature of your business, Leslie. Who are some of your competitors? How do you fit into that at this point? And what are you doing differently that's potentially putting you ahead of them or that
Love
might put
that
you ahead of them?
question.
Thank you.
Absolutely love that question. Um, we are firmly in the multifamily payment space.
Right.
So I'll just make that clear.
Hmm.
It's a fascinating space because only maybe 15 or 20 years ago, the multifamily world was not even taking electronic payments. So
Jeez.
still over 75% of properties take payment using checks.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
I'll just point out, when a
75%.
when a college student
Yeah. Hmm.
finishes college and is
Hmm.
looking for her first apartment and she goes to set up a bank account, it's pretty funny because the story is that the bank teller says, "Oh, and you'll need checks." And her reaction is often like, "What is a
What's a
check?"
check? Right, what's a check?
And the bank will say, "You'll need checks to pay your rent."
Right.
So there is
Right.
the story in a
Yeah.
nutshell. Um, It is a world that is just now
Yeah.
erupting with
Mhm.
new digital solutions, and even
Mhm.
prop tech is a relatively new term.
Mhm.
We are squarely in that, and we also started before the concept of buy now, pay later became part of our lexicon.
Which is
So,
like what, Klarna, things like that, and,
and Affirm.
what?
Affirm.
Yeah, right.
So if you go to any retailer and start to buy online, you will be offered the ability to split your payment. I mean, now it's
Right.
become so you can split payment on buying a six-pack of beer. I mean, it's really kind of shocking.
Yes.
And certainly the banks and the Consumer Finance Bureau are concerned about over leveraging by individuals.
Mhm.
But I will say, while we are not buy now, pay later, that industry has given us a tailwind. It has
Right.
made it
Sure.
so that consumers expect to be
Mhm.
able to split up their payment. They
Mhm.
expect to be able to pay on an app,
Mhm.
and they expect to be able to get notifications about their upcoming payments.
Mhm.
We are the only one who is an app, splits up payments, does notifications, and does credit reporting, positive only credit
Mhm.
reporting.
Mhm.
We also are the only one who helps properties handle back payments, meaning missed rent payments.
Got it.
And so that's our space. The
Mhm.
competition tackles some of that. So I'll give
Mhm.
you an example. There's one company who has done incredibly well in raising funds that just does positive rent reporting to the bureaus. That's all they do.
Mhm.
Little sliver of what we do, called a Suzu.
Mhm.
There's another company that just does flexible payments called Flex.
Mhm.
There are no companies that have put it all together as a real flexible payment
Solution.
platform like what
Yeah,
we
right.
do that
Mhm.
truly helps the property improve their NOI.
Carol Schultz here. Thanks for watching this excerpt from Authentically Successful. The conversation doesn't end there. So if you want to hear this episode in full and all my conversations with many other successful founders and CEOs, please visit verticalelevation.com/podcast.